Thanks everyone for joining. We're going to we'll get the panelists introduced here in a second. So we've been at this OMG thing for almost a year, 1,500 members now. So thanks to all of you for joining. And this is, I think, is this our 9th panel, Karen? Or yeah. So
yes,
these panels are getting stronger and stronger as we go in terms of participation, engagement, and the panelists, and today is no exception to that. So, you know, these guys are ready to share some awesome insights with you. And as a reminder on the call today, you know, this is not a sales call. We're not pitching products. However, we're casual. I do like it when folks, you know, can, you know, jump in and ask questions. So if, you know, if you have a question that you want to raise to these guys, do it in the chat, and then we'll try and get to some of those questions as we go, and we'll mix in audience questions as we can, and then at the end, if there's time, you know, we'll just open up the forum, and people can go live and ask questions. So with that, we will start our first poll, and the poll is, of course, centered around holiday readiness, and the question is, how many of you have spent your Thanksgiving weekend in some sort of command center or 24/7 bridge trying to recover a part of your e-commerce operation? Oh, go ahead and answer. Lord knows I've been there.
Yeah.
I bet the true gurus haven't. Right.
Exactly.
I was going to say you. I was going to say not me for sure.
Hey, Deepak, how are you?
Very good. Hey, good, Bernie. It's really nice to see you.
Good to see you too.
You look like you're living the retired life for sure.
I am.
Well, I'm glad to that we have, you know, gotten you out of retirement. So we need to
Just 1 hour. In scuba diving, it's called surface interval between dives.
Yes, we'll be diving into this topic now.
All right, go ahead, Karen. Let's see the poll results here. Yes. All right. Almost 70% of us. 33% no. Okay, well, that's great. You're here. You're hopefully going to avoid showing up in the command center. So that's the purpose of this call, of course. All right.
I think 33% created the trouble.
They what? What's that?
33% created they created the trouble for the other people.
For the other 70%.
All right. Well, so we're gonna get again, reminder as we get into the panel, audience questions, drop them in the chat. Karen will flag me on those, and then we'll try and bring those in. So we've got, as I said in the promo, literally 60+ years of experience here this morning to talk about OMS holiday readiness. So I'm going to let the panelists introduce themselves, and then once we get that done, we'll jump into it. So Ashish, go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you, Chap, for inviting me into the panel. Looking forward to having a solid discussion here. Quickly, my introduction. I am Ashish. I'm the Vice President Fulfillment Technology, working with a third-party logistics company, which is Radial Inc. It's been in existence for more than 30 years. Typically, what Radial does is it's like a third-party logistics company. We power some of the world's biggest brands. Global brands have trusted us for over 30+ years. Initially started as GSI Commerce, then it got over, then we became eBay Enterprise, and then we became Radial. Right now, Radial is part of the Belgian Post Group. So primarily third-party logistics, we provide fulfillment, that is warehousing, transportation, omni-channel solutions, payments, and customer care solutions. My experience is 23+ years of experience overall. Been with Radial for 1.5 years. Prior to this, I was with Manhattan Associates, it's again a supply chain company. I had been with them for 20+ years. So that's a quick, brief introduction.
All right, great, thanks. Bernie, go ahead.
Hi, Bernie here. I started in OMS in the year 2000 with the Yonder solution, Yonder company. Then Yonder got acquired by Sterling, then IBM, and then finally by by Blue Yonder. 2014, we started a company called Yantrix, and then 2023, June last year, I retired. So in the last, I think 8 years, I was doing, well, since 2000, I've been doing performance, but in the last 8 years, I've also been doing application security.
All right. Awesome.
Chap.
Go ahead, Deepak.
Hey, hey everyone. Thank you for having me here. My name is Deepak Bajpai. I work as a Senior Director of Technology for Order Management System and Order Platform applications for entire Lowe's. For those of you who don't know Lowe's, it's a Fortune 50 company and one of the biggest retailer for home improvement in the world. We are an omni-channel retailer with 1,700 stores, 1,700 plus stores in US and a significant .com presence. Prior to this, I started my career in Sterling Commerce, which eventually became IBM. And then after IBM, I joined Target for at least 4.5 years. And this is my third company as Lowe's. I also want to mention that I'm deeply honored to share a panel with Bernie, who has been a mentor for all performance engineers and developers across OMS world. So thank you, Chap, and thank you, Nextuple, for inviting me over here.
Thanks, Steve.
Awesome. Yeah. So we've got three great perspectives: an active retailer, an active service provider, and obviously Bernie, who's somewhat the godfather of OMS performance engineering. All right. Well, let's get into it. The first question is really, we want to set the context, and I'm going to let Deepak take this, which is when we talk about the OMS domain and holiday readiness, is, frame for us, what does the OMS domain actually mean nowadays? Because it's probably changed from what it was, 5-10 years ago. So go ahead and let's set the context domain before we actually get into the performance discussion.
I think as we all know, order management system in retail serves as the backbone of operations, ensuring efficient handling of orders from creation to fulfillment. Right now, over the course of past 2 decades, I guess OMS has evolved from being one single system to an assembly of interconnected components working together in unison. Right, we have built microservices architecture, event-driven architecture, and moved ourselves from the monolithic systems of the private world. Right now, in this context, when we talk about holidays in particular, different kind of retailers perceive holiday in a different way. For example, a small mom and pop store may not even have a dedicated order management system, and they will not think much from the readiness standpoint. But however, a big box retailer who's handling millions of orders on a daily basis and evolved over time to give a more omni experience to customer need to start the preparation way before the November days. Right now, I think in this conversation we should think in totality and consider different types of OMSs which exist in this world right now, and from a more modern day approach where OMS orchestrates both online and offline orders. I think that should be our purview in this call.
Okay, wonderful. So let's not, the point is, let's not think about this as a Manhattan solution or a Sterling solution or one OMS vendor, but a collection. Maybe there still be an OMS application there, but it could be surrounded with multiple microservices that's making it a viable product. Okay, that's great. And then as we think about that application, Deepak, is that, should we consider the OMS a P0 or P1 application for holiday? And please explain what we mean by P0 and P1 in case people aren't familiar with those terms.
Okay, I think let me define, right? So in this retail industry standard, if you look at it, P0 applications are the ones which impacts direct sales of an organization in a very simple manner, right? In my opinion, OMS as a system should be designed and architected in such a way that it doesn't come in the critical path of order capture, and its primary purpose should be to orchestrate the order fulfillment. Now, what I mean by that is OMS should be a P1 application, which is still makes it a very, very critical application, because failure of which can lead to fulfillment delays or eventually cancellation of orders, which indirectly impact your revenue due to low LTR score and some standard customer experience. But the architecture of OMS should not come into the direction of order capture, which happens in different channels, be it is .com or store. So in my opinion, it should be a P1 application. Its DR strategy should also be designed as a P1 application, which can be active passive, which can be active active based on the big box retailer you're working with.
Interesting. Ashish or Bernie, would you guys subscribe to that? That the OMS should not be considered a P0 application and in the way of order capture? Bernie, I'll let you go first.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. I mean, I like what Deepak was saying, loosely couple the OMS away from the order capture. My only thought would be, what about the inventory management? Like if you're capturing all these orders, how can you decrement all these inventory to prevent oversells? But I do like I do like your thought about decoupling as
And I
much as
see,
possible.
and I see where you're coming from. So I think and that's a very good point, right? So apart from inventory, which is the always changing thing while the order is getting captured, everything else can take later after order creation, and that is where we need to segregate the different components which I was talking about when I was talking about OMS. That inventory is a separate component in OMS, and that could be in the path of order capture, and rest everything can be aside. But absolutely, bang on, Bernie.
Am I inferring then your answer that you consider inventory actually not a part of the OMS domain in a separate system, and you're calling that P0? Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
In a nutshell, yes.
Okay. All right. Very, very important distinction, because I think a lot of people come to this discussion thinking inventory is a part of OMS. All right.
Yeah.
Ashish, anything that you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that I was about to call out inventory as well. Thanks, Bernie, because I mean, if you are going to release orders, you're going to be, base it on inventory, right? And we are, I mean, typical OMS, you can have multiple nodes, you can have multiple fulfillment centers, the way you want to route your orders or release your orders, right? One is capture, then release, right? Then you've got logistics coming into play. So, I mean, there's a lot, that is at play. Obviously, OMS is the core application when you look at it, right? You can, I mean, again, based on your orders, you're doing your payments, settling your invoices. Yeah, it's a bit challenging, right? I like the way we are having this discussion, but again, a P1, P0 versus a P1, I still feel it's kind of a gray area, right? I wouldn't call it a P1 per se. Then again, I'm in the middle, right? I cannot take a stance on this. That's how I like to put it.
Okay. All right. Well, very interesting. Right up front, you've challenged a stereotype I think that most people have, which is that the inventory is really a part of the OMS. So great, I love it. All right, let's talk, Ashish. This one's for you. What are some of the common mistakes that you see retailers, grocers, whoever, making when they think about holiday readiness? Let's just start with some of the common ones, and then we'll riff from there.
Yeah, sure. I'm sure you guys have been in this industry for long, but one thing I always call out is like preparing for the unexpected, right? I mean, we've gone through these holiday season peaks for a long time, right? I think we have. It's more like now AI will be driving a lot of this stuff because it's coming into the system, it's learning the system. But again, the experience, that's the best teacher, correct? But again, there are challenges every year, right? It could be macroeconomic conditions. I mean, it's how you place your inventory, right? So my the tagline is you prepare for unexpected, right? What can we control, right? This is the non-functional requirements. That is what I see when it comes to ensuring that your system is scalable, right? We are able to scale. We are flexible. We can adapt to the growing volumes. I mean, volumes is another challenge, right? I mean, it's not easy to predict, right? No matter what, it's not a easy math. End of the day, you can come in short, you can come in high. I mean, we work with a lot of customers, right? Some are spot on, some are below, some are way above, right? So there is a lot of challenge in terms of what is it that volume that we are shooting towards. But again, your baseline is go back to your historical data, right, and plan for it. So I think preparing our application, that's your best bet, right? Obviously, you've got a lot of other stuff. It's not just OMS when you're delivering, right? You're also delivering on your logistics, you're delivering on your fulfillment. Again, at the same time, what can we do from OMS's perspective, right? 100% uptime. right? I mean, there's a lot that goes into this. I think a lot of retailers, I mean, sometimes you're just thinking of OMS as an application, and order comes in, and rest of the work is done by fulfillment, right? That's not the case today, right? I mean, OMS is is a big piece, a critical piece, right? That's where your P0, P1 comes into play as well, correct? So preparing for it and making sure that I mean, when I look at the non-functional requirements, it has to be available. It has to be performant, redundancy. I mean, Deepak talked about the DR strategies, right? I mean, you cannot have your OMS system go down, right? That means you're impacting the whole holiday sale, right? There cannot be slowness too, right? You will have to make sure that your system doesn't slow down at any given point in time, because then you start creating backlogs, right? So I'm focusing a whole lot on non-performance. This is non-functional requirements. Right? That is one area I think everybody has to focus on, right? No matter what, because your order volumes are increasing, right? Give or take, there's a lot of newer technologies that are coming in. You need to keep adapting to it, right? I mean, Deepak also talked about monolithic applications versus microservices. Yes, microservices is great, right? There are still OMSs that are sitting in on-prem systems. How do I scale, right? I mean, you have to scale horizontal and vertical. So there's a lot that is going on in this world. How do you move to a SaaS-based solution, a cloud-based solution, right? Where somebody else takes care of a lot of these opportunities, right? In terms of scaling and making sure that your application is resilient, fault tolerant, right? So again, coming back, and then obviously observability and then your SRE practices. I think that's playing a key role today as well, right? Preparing you for that volume growth that is going to come in, making your systems resilient, fault tolerant. I think these are some of the key things that we need to bring into the equation. Sometimes these are overlooked. Chap, again, open for discussion here.
Right. Now, when you say prepare for the unexpected, a lot of times I've been in situations where, some of the business leaders are unwilling to commit to holiday volumes, right? They won't put a number out there. So when you're in that situation, is preparing for the unexpected, preparing for peaks that are 100% higher than the last year, 200%? Like, where's that level of comfort that you would, when you're not getting good reads about what the volumes are going to be, or maybe you're going to ignore them anyway and you're going to plan for 2x? I guess, Deepak, why don't you answer that question? Like, how do you prepare? What's enough cushion, I guess, is the question, against whatever targets are out there, whether they're historical or they're actual?
Okay, I think traditionally what has been happening in this world, and I think that is a good way of looking into it, is that we usually take the 100% of last year, multiply it by maybe 1.5 times, and then double it or triple it for performance engineering or performance testing, right? That is a usual way we follow when we try to test a number overall, right? How many orders gets created. Having said that, I guess uh, the world has been changing, and I think the one period where everyone might have gone wrong would be the COVID period, right? Where people didn't understood how much traffic can come on those days. In fact, they didn't understand what was happening before that as well, right? But that is once in a lifetime thing to happen. So I would suggest that the numbers should be for, so of course the numbers forecast will come from your other departments, not tech department as such, but from your readiness standpoint, I think 1.5 into 2 or 1.5 into 3 is a good number to go for, based on your, unless you are growing like a startup or something, which mostly not the case.
Okay, good. Bernie, any thoughts you want to add to that?
Yeah, no, those are really good answers. What I would also add on is, no matter how big the performance environment is, if you can only do like 1.5 or 2 times, what you should do is just keep stressing the system as hard as possible, and then find the breaking points, and then record those, so that if the traffics do go up to that level, or start approaching those levels, at least in advance what's going to break, and see if there's any other plan Bs or alternate paths that you can go down. But yeah, those are all good answers. I agree that the world's changing so fast, you know, retailers are adopting so many new technologies. You know, it's incredible how much risk we have to adopt.
Right. Okay, great. And I want to go back to the conversation we were having at the start about this with inventory being P0 and OMS being O1. Another component that has changed in the last few years is promising, so estimated delivery dates. And in many cases, the order management system is providing that data to the front end. How do you guys think about that component as a part of holiday readiness? Meaning, is that something that you would might maybe dial back in terms of and making an accurate promise during that? You know, shut that functionality down completely as it relates to the holiday experience, or how do you think about that element of the, you know, because that's moving upstream into the shopping funnel now, like inventory. You know, I guess Deepak, be curious, how is Lowe's thinking about that in terms of holiday right now?
So I think Lowe's would so if you have to learn from that perspective, Lowe's would be a good example, would have been a good example maybe a couple of years back or maybe before that, because now we have streamlined so much that we don't prepare for holiday separately in terms of promising, which is concerned, right? But yeah, to answer your question, maybe a few years back, if I look at it, right, I think it all depends. So OMS touches each and every aspect of a retailer. When I say that, what I mean by that is, I mean, first thing you have to look at your system, you have to scale your system. That's one. But having said that, you have integration with humans in stores, and you have logistics, suppliers, everything coming into picture, right? You were asking the question, what is something which we make mistake while preparing for holiday readiness? And I would say that we always focus on system, and we leave the other aspects which is happening across OMS, and promising is one of those, right? So as a system, you need to scale for it. That's a different thing, but you need to consider promising and those delivery dates, considering the traffic which is going to come on those days. And I think that is something which there's a sweet spot which you need to find over a period of years. You might not be able to get it in the you might not be able to crack it very soon in the beginning. Some of the things which we have done is based on the supplier, based on the last mile delivery, we have found that this is the pattern which we are seeing on the weekends. This is the pattern which we are seeing on a day where it is too much load. And how do we want to promise? And have put machine learning sometimes over there to be able to do that. But that is still happening. That's still a process, and it's in the process right now, not completed as such.
Okay, great. Very interesting. You talk about, it sounds like holiday readiness is just kind of it's an ongoing thing for you. Ashish, from your perspective, and you deal with multiple clients, like when do you typically advise, retailers to start the holiday readiness activity?
Yeah, and it's an ongoing process. I think, like Deepak mentioned, even holidays. Meaning, we are not looking at just November, December, right? I mean, throughout the year there are sales, and we have multiple customers going in. So there are a lot of chances for us to optimize the system, right? See how the sales are going based on the volumes, right? So obviously, it comes to a converging point when we come to the exact holiday sales. So, like I said, it's a continuous process. At the same time, I think there's a big focus that goes in when we start June, July, right? That is exactly the time when we start working with our retailers, with our clients, and start looking at forecasts. And I mean, there's a lot today in terms of gathering data. I mean, clients are also they are also moving into AI. We have AI systems, right? We kind of know what is coming in, what could be coming in. I mean, obviously the economic factors, the macroeconomic factors, inflation, a lot of things are outside our control too, right? I think to Deepak's point, it's again, there are so many factors, that outside of OMS, right, that we need to deal with as well. It's not just OMS. We can deal with volumes, right? We can prepare for volumes. Again, there is stuff right outside our control. So there's a lot of activities that go on from June. I mean, in terms of system readiness, operational readiness, business readiness, gathering forecasts, and there is labor planning too, because I mean, we are a full shop, right? OMS, fulfillment, transportation, payments, customer care. So we want to make sure that, the data is flowing through end to end. So there's a lot that goes into the process, Chap, right? So to answer your question, we do start in the June, July timeframe, and we get all the stakeholders in, not just tech, right? It's just across the organization, the business, the service delivery teams, operations, and even the customer care teams, right? Just to make sure that we are on the same page, we start communicating, right? And we also have our action items.
Okay, great. And I'm gonna bring in a question from the audience from Darko, which is any best practices on fraud as it relates to holiday readiness? So, maybe a retailer is typically holding, 1 to 2% of their orders from a fraud perspective, or they've got certain fraud rules that they've deployed during the year. Have you seen any strategies around different fraud rules to mitigate, A, there's likely a higher degree of fraudulent activity going on, but B, just from an order volume perspective, have you seen anything done there on the fraud side? And I'll let any one of you take that. Any input there?
Yeah, we do have, at least from Radial's perspective, we do have payments and frauds, right? I'm really not an expert in that area, but yes, I think that's a very, very good question to ask as well. I mean, we do see a bit of fraud activity, and we let the customers know as well that, there's something going on here, right? I mean, same addresses. I mean, we see there is a pattern, right? There is an algorithm that we have in our systems to monitor these activities.
Yeah.
And do it throughout the year, but again, yes, during the holiday sales, we do see a spike at this point in time, Chap, and we do have a strategy around it, right? Maybe
Yeah.
I can come back and provide more details on what exactly we do from systems perspective. But yes, that's one of the biggest things that our customers like about our offerings as well, Chap.
Sure. Okay.
And
Cool.
just to add on to that in a one statement, right? I mean, not with respect to the frauds with payments as such, but any attack which happens on you from in .com or something, right? I think off late we have been preparing ourselves to have those smart alerts in place where a circuit breaker is not only working for an API, but it's working at the API key level, where an unsurge or unwanted surge of traffic is coming from a particular consumer or different API keys, we should be having a circuit breaker at that moment. So not with respect to fraudulent payments, but at least from a overall attack which happens during those times.
Okay. All right. Great. Let's get into some technical questions in terms of, we'll start with environments. What is a best practice around environments that are needed to support holiday readiness testing? Do you need a dedicated performance test environment? Just in, I'll let Deepak or Bernie, if you want to weigh into that question. What is the best practice there?
Did you want
Okay.
deep? Okay, sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
But you go ahead first.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Bernie.
No, go ahead, Deepak, go ahead.
Okay, I think see, most retailers are going in directions of having only 3 environments, right? Dev, stage, prod, and they want to utilize the stage environment for the performance, right? And they want developers to work in that direction. I have a different opinion, and I don't know what Bernie is thinking, but I have a different opinion on that. I think that uh, there should be a dedicated perf environment, which could be a pre-prod environment, and it should be exactly equal to your production environment. May not be the same data as such because that's a humongous activity, but yeah, given. But the configurations and the pods, the Kafka topics, partitions, consumer threads, everything has to be exactly similar with prod because we are working the entire year. We have architect and designed the entire system to be able to survive for those 3 or 4 days. I think we can spend that much amount of infra and finance to be able to have that solidarity over there, and it may be handled by a couple of folks, maybe one folk, maybe developers itself. But my opinion is that we should have a dedicated environment. Bernie, go ahead.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I would definitely like to have a dedicated performance environment because there are so many changes coming down the road, right? New technologies, new interfaces, etc. But in addition to the dedicated performance environment, you also have to have a dedicated performance team. Because if you don't have the right team and expertise, that environment is just going to sit idle for a long time. Yeah.
Yeah.
For
Okay.
sure.
And then in terms of folks running on-prem versus cloud, Bernie, any input on how that needs to be handled differently?
I would say that generally speaking, you would have to handle the performance testing the same as on-prem. On the cloud, you can, definitely spin up environments faster, but still the solution, tends to be fairly complicated. The architecture, the data, is very, very unique to each customer. With all the changes coming down, in addition to whatever you found, whatever issues you found from the last peak, if there were issues, you would then have to find out what happened. So you have to retest the environment, see if you can recreate the issues. If you can recreate the issues, then you have to engage engineering to come up with a new solution, new changes. So that again requires performance testing, regardless of cloud or non-cloud.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. I'm going to bring in another audience question. Considering this is from Akash, considering the microservice ecosystem and OMS and inventory being two different systems, actually, no, that's not the question. Sorry, I'm going to bring in a different question here. I'm seeing in the chat. My bad. Are you treating your microservices as products? So do they have a defined SLI, SLO, SLA defined to measure the success of that specific microservice? I'm assuming the answer is yes to that, Deepak.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. Then let me come back to this other question. How can you build a reconciliation process to sync the demands of active and order lines between inventory and OMS in order to avoid underselling and overselling? Obviously during holiday, those volumes are exacerbated, so that synchronization or reconciliation process becomes critical. Any best practices on that?
That's a very good question. I think someone is in the business. Very good question. I can tell you from my personal experience, when I'm migrating OMS from one system to maybe microservices, right? The biggest challenge is to sync the demands, and there is. We have thought about multiple ways of doing it. But once we thought that we'll build maybe separate two different, maybe one is conversing through Kafka, one is conversing through Cube. There's a legacy system, there's a new system, and both are talking and saving it in one database. Then we thought we'll have a separate databases, and we thought we'll have a wrapper layer in between or something. But I think there is no best way out there to be able to fix this. The best way to be able to do that maybe is to have two separate flows into one single DB, and the SLAs and the alert should be so good that this should be treated as this particular component should be treated as your P0 or order creation component. So I guess uh, we need to have a sync. Let's not have one system who is consuming from both. We can always use a new technology such as Flink, or maybe I'll not say K-Stream, but let's say Flink, which is coming along having a stateless or stateful application, right? And is still trying to consume from two different applications and can save it in the database in the right manner. So I think we need to find our solution somewhere in between that, and can use some open source applications which are built for this.
Okay. Bernie or Ashish, anything you guys want to add to that?
Just one caution, as you keep adding more and more data stores and repositories, you have to think about what would happen if one system came down and you have to restore. How do you then bring back the integrity of the data when you do after the restore?
Yeah, absolutely. Good point.
And you mean how will you reconcile from
Right.
where you?
Yeah, after the restore, yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Ashish, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think we deal with this definitely a lot because we do have inventory services that are built in, right? And we consume inventory snapshots from multiple sources. I mean, when you look at order management systems, initially we had this inventory service as a separate service to Deepak's point, like the P0 and P1, right? Then we brought in the inventory service within the order management system right now. But again, we are consuming this. Obviously, building redundancy is very, very important. I mean, even if you have Kafka topics, you want it to be persistent. It goes down, it needs to come back up. And obviously, resiliency is very important. And this is critical, right? I mean, underselling, overselling will be a challenge, right? If we do not solve this problem, because
Yeah.
the order management system is always releasing orders based on the inventory snapshots it gets from its fulfillment centers, right? So keeping it as real time as possible, keeping the feeds, good. That's the key at the end of the day, right? I mean, you can receive feeds from multiple. We've got like 25 facilities. We've run on like 6 or 7 different WMS systems, but the OMS system is central, right? So you got to make sure that the feeds are coming real time and ensuring and making sure that you're not having order cancellations or overselling.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Awesome. This next question was my favorite one of the bunch, which is, what if, what would be your response to the question, isn't this my SaaS provider's problem? Why should I care about holiday readiness if I paid a SaaS provider to run my OMS for me? I'm going to let Bernie, you can lead on that one if you'd like.
Okay. I would say that if you have a group of customers that are doing the same kind of work on the same architecture, same data pattern, same tightly coupled integration, everything the same, they're all doing the same kind of work, then there's a possibility that the SaaS provider may have, performance tests that they can spin up and just test everybody the same. But however, I think for most of the customers, everybody has unique architectures, unique integration and all that stuff. There's no way the SaaS provider could keep up with all of the changes. So I think it's still up to the customer to do the performance testing.
Okay. All right.
You guys agree? You guys agree?
Yeah, absolutely. And I second that because I mean we cannot trust the SaaS provider to ensure that it's going to be fine because finally we are betting our business, right? It's just a provider. We need to make sure that there are multiple clients flows. There could be extensions, enhancements, right? Which is something that we could have done, right? And the provider is not responsible for it. So yes, absolutely, I'm with Bernie on this one. We need to make sure that we do our due diligence to make sure that we do all the testing that is required to again ensure client success and obviously company success too.
Okay. Okay. All right. Deepak, you want to add anything to that?
I think, absolutely right. Both of them have said all the points, and I absolutely second what Bernie said. I think we have had these type of issues in past where forget about order management system as a whole, right? You have databases. Everyone uses databases in the world in their own way, right? And in a way, it is a software as a service, maybe at the end of the day. And you still have issues. You still have issues in each. You are having a NoSQL or a SQL database. The way you have designed it, everyone has their own DB and they have issues. So why this software is different? That is also a software which is being used by every retailer in their own way. Yes, it has specific functionality towards retail, but ultimately it's a software which can be used. So everything what Bernie and Ashish said, I second that completely. That there's no one silver bullet.
Yeah. Okay. And I'm going to bring in an audience question that kind of dovetails into another question I had for you guys, which is, talking about, promises that are made to consumers like order now and get it 2 hours at the store. Are those promises that, so are you keeping the same level of that kind of promise as you go through holiday? And if you are, what are you doing to ensure that that happens? What are some best practices around that? Are you dialing back the expectation, or are you keeping it? And then if you are keeping it, what are you doing to make sure it happens?
Well, I think I'll take a stab on it, maybe for a couple of minutes. That I think you need to, if you have promised that entire year, you need to promise in those days as well. There should not be any difference for those days. You might get into some issues because of the volume, but that does not go well with the customers to start with, right? So you want to keep the promise, number one. Number two, the issue in these cases where 2 hours of delivery is concerned is not mostly with the system as such. as much as it has to do with the delivery partner which you are using or your own delivery fleet which you have,
Right.
and the humans involved in those deliveries. Uh, I think there are delivery partners out there, or maybe I would say aggregators out there like Instacart in US right now,
Yep.
and Uber Eats, and then there is Shift and DoorDash, everything which is coming in future. They are promising that, and they are just buying it from a big box retailer and sending it to your home. So those big box retailers are still using these delivery partners to be able to do that. So it's not, it's again the problem of software as a service. They are delivery as a service. They are just utilizing those delivery partners and promising the same thing on that day.
Right. Right. Okay. Bertie or Ashish, you guys want to add any commentary on that?
I would say from a performance engineer's perspective, I would like to keep that as a back pocket item, saying that, hey, if through our performance testing, we know we cannot meet the 2-hour deadline, then start the conversation with business saying, okay, for Thanksgiving, we definitely have to turn it off. If we have to turn it off somehow. And then let the customers know.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I can add Chap as well. So I mean, typically we are in that business. We are, there are stringent SLAs as well on this topic, right? And it's right throughout the year. It's not just through holiday sale period. It could be a volume issue during the sale period. But again, we have something called click to deliver or ship to deliver, right? So we have those SLAs contracts to meet with the customer. So we try to keep it as realistic as possible. I mean, obviously the world is very competitive. People want it, in a click of a moment. But again, it depends, right? I mean, we need to work through carrier capacities too, right? I think he called it out, Deepak, mentioning. I mean, it's even outside of OMS and even fulfillment, right? Even if you get everything. So the way it works is as soon as the order is dropped, our clocks are ticking basically, right? And if you've got a 2-day
Yep.
delivery to meet, that means you got to fulfill it in a few hours and make sure that your carrier is right there, and they have capacities to take your packages and make sure that it is delivered on time. So it's like click to Porsche as well. So I think there's a lot of moving parts here. It is challenging. Again, you've got like third-party things as well, like inclement weather could impact your delivery too. So again, there are exceptions, there are contingencies. And during peak volumes, it becomes a little more challenging, right? Because the volumes are high, your carriers are always busy. So you need to have great contracts with your carriers. Luckily, Radial does, because they've been partnering with a lot of these carriers for a long, long time. But again, you need to make sure that the capacity is available, your forecasts are right. So you got to meet a lot of those expectations and guidelines to make sure that you are delivering on time, right, or before time, or even a 2-hour window, right?
Right.
So we got to
Right.
be realistic. I think clients know that, they understand the
Yeah.
business. Yeah.
Okay. And I guess coupled with that, have you guys seen anybody get creative on trying to shift holiday volumes to other parts of the holiday to mitigate some of those issues? And if you have seen that, what are some of those strategies that you've seen? I'll let Deepak, why don't you go first? Then I'll let Bernie go.
Yeah, I think, I mean, all the retailers out there, right? They are distributing their promotions on the weekends, on the 3 weekends before the last weekend of November, right?
Right.
One day they are distributing the promotions in a way that the categories which they are selling, maybe one day there's apparels, then there's another day where there's maybe home improvement, and then there's toys. Toys is something which they actually dedicatedly put just before the holiday, so that the children don't kill the .com, right? So I guess that strategy is being followed by each and every retailer out there, and they are distributing the promotions across November.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Bernie, anything to add there?
Totally agree with Deepak. And I think it's not only weekends, I think it's also weekdays. We've noticed that before I retired, the last couple of Thanksgiving peaks have not been as high. It's been really spread out over the month of November. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Good music to my ears. Less stress.
Bernie, what areas of the OMS domain do you think can be overlooked as it relates to holiday readiness?
Actually, that's a good question. I'm not sure. What areas of the OMS can be overlooked? Actually, I'm not sure.
Okay.
Well,
Right?
well, other than the performance testing, from my perspective, you know, early in the year, like in January, start the performance design and planning. You know, after peak, after the previous peak in January, when it's still fresh in everybody's mind, talk about what were the issues, what were the shortcomings, where were all the bottlenecks, and then for each issue, start to have a plan on how to mitigate that.
And is from an ownership of holiday readiness technical activities, is that the product team that owns that? Is that app support? Like what have you seen work the best there in terms of kind of ownership?
I've seen it across the board. Whoever is a strong leader who wants to champion performance usually grabs it.
Okay. All right. Deepak, any insights from you there?
I think while the support team typically acts as the first responders, especially managing various products across the organization during holiday periods, I think the primary ownership for holiday preparation should fall under the purview of the product team entirely, right? Because they have the detailed knowledge and the product intricacies. As Bernie said, right, that whoever is the smartest in the room maybe can take the call on that day. Usually, we have clear roles defined among the partner team to ensure seamless coordination.
Yeah.
It is also imperative to establish dedicated points of contact within the product team for each component. So, I guess this ensures the support team has direct access to product experts who can swiftly address the issue. Uh,
Yeah.
that is
Okay.
all, but the purview is under product team, I guess.
Okay. And how about from a funding perspective? Someone comes across a big performance engineering issue that they had, how do you see organizations funding this activity?
Do you want me to take that? I
Yeah,
can
go ahead.
take that.
Yeah, I can take that too. I mean, we do have budgets for this, right? Because this is not just a sale event, right? It's the money spinner for an organization as well, and especially when I look at a 3PL, right? Even any retailer, right? I think, I mean, even though we can gradually do the sales, to Bernie's point, right? We are spacing it out. We're not doing one big bang on a given day, right? We've got these pre-sales, then just before Thanksgiving we have a sale like Amazon, right? They do prime sales. Then they look at optimizing their systems. Typically everybody else is doing that as well in this industry, right? So I think there's a lot of funding that is a budget that is coming in and making sure that all the stakeholders understand, right? I mean, there is investments, not just tech, it's across the board, to make sure that there is enough budget available to make sure that we are successful, right? It could be 5%, 1%, 10%, right? But I think the consciousness is there to make sure that there is budget. And like the performance test environment, right? It's kind of a no-brainer for us. We have it ready. We have a performance engineering group as well, right?
Yeah.
So just constantly working on it throughout the year. So that requires consistent funding. I mean, it pays off at the end, right?
Right.
So
Just like you would naturally have funding for app support all year, you got to have funding for performance testing.
oh yeah, absolutely.
I have a slightly not a different opinion, but maybe a different school of thoughts that absolutely every retailer have proper funding for any holiday readiness, uh, and they are spending that much on those days after, let's say, August or September, right? I think what some retailers might do, and which is something which they regret later, is that they, while designing and architecting, they cut the corners across, let's say, a data guard or maybe an application, very efficient application, but it's licensed, right? Or maybe some infrastructure to have, like, for a perf environment, right? So we don't have to cut those corners across the year, because you have funds for the entire for the end of the year, but that does not mean that you cut the corners in the beginning. So that would be my slightly different school of thought.
Okay. All right. That's great. I love it. All right. I'm going to get lightning round here. I want each of you to give me your worst holiday performance nightmare and something that you learned from that you've applied throughout the rest of your career. Give us a nightmare story that you learned a lot from. So, Bernie, I'm going to let you go first.
So as you know, every year I get I get called, I get pulled into many customers' environment, either for the holiday readiness or in case of a major issue. Usually, whenever there's a major issue, it's because of a lack of a performance test, or they were doing performance tests, but they weren't testing the right scenarios or with the right data. So, for example, customers, some customers in the past have taken their inventory and just increased all the inventory levels to 9999999 and then ran it, and then that gives a different performance characteristics. So yeah, usually it would be some kind of a major issue due to testing.
Got it. Okay. Ashish, how about you?
Yeah, definitely many in my past 23 years. But one of them I would say, which I can generalize as a pattern, is obviously going towards performance testing again, right? Because no matter what we do, I mean the scale that we look at, if there's a queue that comes down, right, it has an impact, right? If the system starts slowing down, it has an impact. It gets backlogged, and the volume that comes in at that point in time, even if the queue is down for half an hour, 1 hour, and I've seen this happen, right? You just come back and say it was just down half an hour, but millions of orders have got queued right now, right? So to process that backlog and to meet the SLAs, right, there is obviously a downstream impact to that. So, and it all boils down to how resilient your system is. You need to self-heal at any given point in time. Something comes down, right? It needs to, kick in, have the right amount of alerts. No manual intervention at that point in time, right? It needs to self-heal immediately. So all this is only possible through a performance engineering team, right? I mean, they are right on it. Got to have the SRE teams in place. So there's a lot, these teams can do. So yes, I think the backlog creation is the worst possible nightmare scenario that I have seen.
Okay. How about you, Deepak?
Yeah, actually, I was thinking about it. So I think I would not take an example where I might have missed by a huge margin. Instead, the worst one for me was, when everything appeared to be running smoothly with all the systems showing green statuses, signifying no critical issues across, right? And however, towards the latter part of the day, I encountered a significant setback. I realized that the sequence we use for invoice generation exceeded the limit and reset it from the beginning. Now, the issue can happen only on the day as the volume was the highest for that in that year, right? And this stemmed from a combination of data and number constraints. You would have got to know that, right? So the impact was so huge that it required an additional 24 hours to rectify and clean the system. And as trivial as it sounds, the impact of this is huge to the millions of customers out there. And the learning is that we chase across GR, we chase across the TPS, the number of orders, response time, performance, everything, right? We do everything right. And a small sequence can actually have the highest impact on your customers. So I guess that was my worst experience overall, because everything was good until that.
Yeah.
Wow. And Bernie, I want to go back to something you said about data and scenarios. You also said, because earlier you were talking about performance environments and you may not have accurate prod data, but now I hear you saying, but you don't want to fake that data to the point where it's not produced. What's the balance there in terms of data setup in your performance environment?
So the data setup is actually the most important thing. It's actually critical. So for example, if you're testing a scenario that kind of mimics the Thanksgiving Day, you may be looking at many, many small orders against an inventory system that has lots and lots of inventory. But then as you get closer to Cyber Monday, you're looking at really depleted inventory, and you have to test for all those different scenarios. And then during Cyber Monday, you may now have a lot of ship confirmations coming back that are colliding with the orders coming in. So yeah, you have to really study the system, and that's one of the key things about holiday readiness. It is not just running a performance test, but running a credible performance test for the different time scenarios that you actually have.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm hearing it's not just about, hey, can the system handle, 10,000 transactions coming in a given hour, but like, what does it look like over a 3-day period of time
Okay.
in this kind of environment where we're going to get pounded with ship confirmations, or we're trying to, invoice hundreds of thousands of transactions on a given day? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
That's great advice.
And unfortunately, the next year, the system could change on you again.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
just one thing to add to Bernie, right? The rules and configuration, because they change constantly. Exactly to the scenario what Bernie mentioned, right? I mean, your Thanksgiving sale is different than what you do on a Cyber Monday, and your rules and configuration they can cause bottlenecks too, right?
Right.
So I mean, yes, I mean, testing for everything is definitely a challenge, but trying to keep it as real as possible. Again, Bernie called that out, right? If we are not as real as possible, then yes, numbers don't mean anything from performance test.
Correct.
Well, that's
And
awesome.
I think one of you guys mentioned the tightly coupled systems like the microservices. Make sure that when you test the system, all tightly coupled systems have to be in the performance test also. But if you do mock it up, then you have to realize that you have to then test the downstream systems.
Oh yeah,
Because it's so tightly
absolutely.
coupled these days. Yeah.
It is the most technical part, I guess, when you're testing those. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, we're at time here. I'm going to make sure to make sure that any retailer that was attending, I'm going to shop on your website this year and make sure that you got all these lessons applied, and your site's going to be in tip-top condition, because there was a ton of great advice that was disposed of this morning across these panelists. I want to thank you guys so much for the insights. And we've all connected with these three guys. I'm sure they'd be happy to connect with you on LinkedIn offline if there's a follow-up question. And my ask to all of you is, great questions here, great dialogue in the chat. Let's keep it going offline if we can, outside in the OMG group itself. If you've got a question in any topic, that's what we're trying to do here with the order management gurus, is share this great knowledge across the community. So Bernie, Deepak, Ashish, you guys have been terrific. I thank you so much for your time, and everyone have a great weekend. Thanks, guys.